Gotcha.
Okay, how's everyone doing?
Good.
Thank you all for coming. We really appreciate your time and your interest in this very important club pursuit. Has everyone had a chance to read the document that was sent out last week and then again yesterday?
Yeah.
Some have. Mrs. Jones, you'll get to it eventually. It's okay. Okay, great. So this presentation will closely mirror what was presented in that document. We will go into some Q&As later on in the presentation. If you have any questions at any time, just please answer, raise your hand and we'll answer them as soon as we can. But again, thanks so much for coming. Appreciate it. So what we will go through in this presentation is an introduction of our Bluff Stability Committee. We'll talk about some of the history of the bluff and shoreline protection that the club has undertaken in the past. We'll highlight some of our previous slope failures. We'll go into a little bit of the science of slope stability and stabilization. And then we'll use a term called revetments, and we'll talk about the construction process, what they are, how they will help protect our shoreline, where they'll be located, and what impact they might have on our golf course and dining experience. And then we'll talk about the risk of future failures as well, followed by what we went through to get to this point in the permit process. And we'll go through two of the most important things are cost and timing. And then again, we'll answer any questions at the end as well. So the first order of business, I would like to introduce our very, very competent, highly competitive, highly skilled golfers and great committee members. We have Mr. Kirby Peters, who's our chair. We have Mr. Jeff Armstrong, who's unable to be here today. We have David Baffa. We have Mr. John Doyle. We have Mr. Bob Mitchell. And everyone's favorite golf course and property manager, Scott Heron, who's sleeping or doing something to work on the golf course right now. And then myself. So thank you all for your hard work on the committee. And again, we've got a lot of great engineering background. We've got construction backgrounds and some financial backgrounds as well. So it's a very well-rounded committee. And as I said, all very good golfers. And good looking too. Okay, so history of shoreline protection. So the neat thing about this image, this was the top picture was an aerial photo taken from the 1965 time range. This was taken in 2020. So you can really see the difference in shorelines with adding those three groins is what they're called. So what I really want you to notice about the groin is you'll see on the left side here, which would be the east side of each of the groins, you'll notice that there's an accumulation of sand or beach or material. On the east side, sorry, the west side of each of them, you'll notice it gets very narrow. There's very little beach and shoreline. So that's something that we'll play into a little bit later on in some of our discussion. But it's very notable that if you're looking at this from a way that the wave patterns hit, they come from, generally speaking, they come from the right side of the screen to the left. So it's basically from primarily from the west to the east. So we'll go into a little bit more of the history of the shoreline protection. So during the 1980s, 3 of the groins were installed along the water's edge. The groins protect the shoreline from wave damage and erosion. The existing groins are still in place and are functional despite showing some signs of age, but each one will be topped up and reinforced during the construction phase. See from the graphic.
Do you want us to defer questions until?
No, you can chime in anytime you like, sir. Yes, please.
Who paid for the groins? Because they're all along the shoreline.
They are. That's a great question. I will get back to you on that. I think we likely did. We own that area. We own the land.
We did for sure.
Yeah. So okay. So we
as
a
in the
club.
80s.
Yeah.
We did in the 80s.
Yeah, the club paid for it.
Then were
The rest were done.
owners way up? Did you keep going east? Were they charged?
It was done by the TRCA, or at that time it was the MTRI, say the Metro Toronto Regional Conservation Authority, and they helped us in the cost because they built a road down the first fairway and then a switchback road down to the lake, and they helped. We shared some of the cost. They shared some of the cost with us, because we allowed them access to build the groins east and west of the property.
I see. So neighbors of ours, residential neighbors going east of here, weren't obligated to pick up any part of the cost, were they? Do you have any
It
knowledge?
was done by, as far as I know, it was done by the city. And
They don't own it.
because they don't own it, we have riparian rights, we own the groins, we did it. And they are now waiting for the TRCA to do their own work in repairing and building up the other groins that aren't on our property. So they're going through a process right now to get that work done. And the neighbors I know to the west are very frustrated because it's a very slow process and they have no timeline. And they need some work done on their groins too.
Interesting. Thank you.
Great question.
Sure,
Thanks for that.
yes. I think one of the big things Kirk said, we own this land. Those neighbors do not. Now, there was a couple, but they don't own the beach or the.
So we go halfway to New York State.
600 feet, but over here, they have to rely on the government because they don't own it and they're a slave to their actions.
That's right. So this is where it's a bit of a double-edged sword. The benefit for us is that we can control what gets done to protect our shoreline, and when the detriment is that we do have to pay for it. Where eventually, if the TRCA says the neighbors to the west or the east that their groins are in disrepair and the city comes in to fix them, that would be no cost to the homeowners because they don't own the repairing rights. But we do. So again, we can move ahead with our plans faster than some of our neighbors can.
Perfect. Thank
So great question, thank you. And you'll be able to see from this, the groin is about a 50-meter section into the lake. So this is just a bit of a close-up view of what you're seeing. So again, this is really just piling rocks in a somewhat sophisticated pattern, just to divert the wave patterns from hitting the shoreline. So I'll talk briefly about a previous failure that we encountered on the west of the 9th green. So for those in attendance, obviously this section about halfway up the slope is what we're referring to. So January 2021 was when this was really brought to our attention. Fortunately for us, it doesn't affect the play of the golf course or anything close to the 9th green, but it is still on our property. We did note that in 2017 and 2019, Lake Ontario experienced very high levels of water. So that likely caused some of the damage, as well as spring and winter storms. Again, the point that I made earlier about the sand and the beach on the one side of the groins versus the side that's a little bit more bare, if you'll notice that failure occurred where there's not a lot of beach buildup or not a lot of sand accumulation. So that's where, again, down the road when we're having this conversation, we'll tell you where the groins are being topped up. We'll tell you where the revetments are being placed, but you'll notice that failures happen in areas where they don't have a lot of sand accumulation.
So does that suggest that the high water waves come in to erode the bottom? Yet the
Yes.
vegetation doesn't suggest that.
So there is a little bit of an undercutting. Whenever you have the high water comes in, when that starts to recede, it pulls away any of the loose soil or sediment, and it somewhat undercuts the ability for the bluff to hold weight above it, and that causes a bit of the potential for failure. So I'll get into this other point down the road as well, but all along our property, the slope is at an unstable level. So eventually, I'll show a slide that has sort of the heat map of how unstable certain areas are. But again, in this section, this is really just the ground finding more of a stable slope naturally. So again, it's through erosion, it's through the failure, but it's trying to find a natural slope line. So here's just a close-up of that image. And again, you really just notice how sandy that composition is. It's really almost entirely sand-based. So once the vegetation on top is gone, it just starts to go. Okay, so this, I think, Ron, you might have to play.
If you hit next, it will go.
Okay, here we go. So this is going to take you on a long and leisurely tour down the entire lake from RC Harris plant. up until about 10 minutes ago, my plan was to jump to about a minute and a half in advance. So I'm just gonna keep talking as we go, but we're seeing a lovely view of RC Harris treatment plant. And again, to your point, sir, we do see a number of the groins along the way that are likely owned by the city, not necessarily homeowners. And again, really in a few seconds, we'll just get to a closer view of our property, and again, another look at that bluff failure as well as what the remainder of our shoreline looks like. And this was a video that was taken earlier this year by the TRCA. So they've been working with us to share their information, share their just knowledge of the shoreline and bluff stability.
None of them own the rights. Jeff,
Yes.
did those, the beaches that have formed based on those? Are they deeper now than they were before those were put in?
Yes, absolutely. So, did everyone hear the question? Where the beaches, like the areas that are, there's more sand that's accumulated, that's a natural formation over the years. So that's just when waves come in, it brings a little bit of sand and soil, puts it up on the beach and then it pulls away. So that's just the natural sort of ebb and flow of just the currents of the water. So here you'll see our failure halfway up the bluff there. And again, this occurred 4 years prior to this video being taken. So really there hasn't been much of a change, not much growth that's occurred on top of it in the time since. And obviously you see where the actual golf course property starts. And again, we've got pretty significant amount of beach to the east of the first groin, and then to the east of the second as well. Beautiful property from above.
That's beautiful.
Okay, great. So the next slope failure that we witnessed occurred in front of the silver tee on the first hole. So for perspective, obviously there's a human being standing by the tee. It's a fairly large washout or blowout. 2 days before the golf course opened this year, Scott Heron, our superintendent, saw this, ran over to me. I came over there. We were panicking. I immediately contacted our partner from Baird Engineering. I said, "Oh my God, we've got a massive new failure. What's happening?" He sent me 2 pictures. One was from 2014 and one was from 2023, and it was exactly the same. So I don't know what I've been looking at for the last 11 years when I've been at those. Mind you, we're not encouraged by the fact that it's there, but it has not seemingly got any larger. But it's something that we are working on with filling in with some soil, some sandbags, some debris, and then really try to grow vegetation on top of it just to stabilize it as much as we can. So we're waiting from our partners at a company called TerraPro to weigh in on the best solution there.
Jeff, is that about the spot that Bob Schoneker's pushcart got blown over?
Similar, but not quite. Okay, so here, again, to go into the science of slope stability and slope stabilization, in early 2021, so shortly after we noticed the failure on the 9th hole, we engaged a company called TerraPro. They're a geotechnical engineering firm to perform slope stability analysis due to the failure on the 9th green. Their study concluded that the structures within the golf course and the immediate area of the failure were not expected to be affected by more slope instability. However, they recommended we also engage with a coastal engineer to address the remainder of our shoreline for risk of failure due to future weather events. So again, that heat map just shows how steep the slopes are. And again, anything in the 1 to 1.6 vertical to horizontal is deemed to have an unstable slope. Committee members, is that mathing?
Basically the red. So
Yeah, the red's bad, yes.
The numbers aren't driving, but it's just that steeper part that's at risk, so.
Okay. So as we got through the process with Baird, the coastal engineers that we ended up hiring were from a firm called Baird Engineering. So they identified the shoreline areas that are at a higher risk of failure and have prioritized 3 key areas that require attention. They recommended placing large boulders and rocks called revetments at the base of the shoreline, at what they call the toe of the bluff, to protect both the shoreline and the bluff from erosion due to waves and higher water. So this next slide asks the question that I asked Google about 18 months ago. What is a revetment? So revetment is a sloping structure made of durable materials like stone. In our case, we're using armor stone, used to protect shorelines or other slopes from erosion caused by waves, currents, or other erosive forces. So essentially, it's protective facing that absorbs and dissipates the energy of water to prevent underlying soil or material from being washed away. Got a really cool image coming up here that shows what a revetment looks like. So again, they strategically pile stones underneath the level of the water all the way up above. But you can just imagine if this image didn't have the stone facing, that water would just keep pounding into the soil. As it hits, it's going to pull some material away. It keeps hitting and pulling away and hitting and pulling away until eventually there's a very, a cavernous structure at the bottom that can't support the weight any longer. So that weight has nowhere to go but down. So by putting the armor stone and the revetment, it's going to absorb a lot of that impact of the waves and prevent the undercutting of the bluff.
Jeff, what's the difference between that revetment and a groin?
So great question. So the groin is more about, I guess, the angles that the waves are coming in. The revetment is a little bit more directly in line with where the waves will attack. I guess it's similar. So where the groins are more of a vertical structure, the revetment is horizontal along the beach area in the areas that are the weakest. So in theory, if you put 10 more groins out there, that might have a really good effect on preventing the areas where the weak points hit. But again, so the long and short, I'd say, is just the groins are more north-south facing. The revetment is more east-west facing and directly on the shoreline. Yeah,
It's easier to build.
potentially. I'm not sure. Yeah. Okay, so I'm hearing from an engineer, yes, revetment is easier to build than groins, so we'll go with that. So yes.
But I think I'd just add that the groins are, perpendicular to the shoreline. And will take, as Jeff was saying, waves that are coming in from the east or west. But if we have big waves that are coming in directly from the south that are bang onto the shoreline, the groins do not dissipate that wave energy. So this now, call it belts and suspenders. We have double protection with groins and revetment. So that's going to protect us forever.
Thank you.
Thank you. And a great question. Okay, so here's a bit of an image that shows somewhat the process of building a revetment. So to arrive at the conclusion of using revetment, it involved many discussions with TRCA, so Toronto Regional Conservation Authority, as well as 2 years of monitoring our bluff stability using drone footage and other scientific observations. So the question is, where will the 3 revetments be located? So this image gives a bit of a high level. It's difficult to see exactly where the groins are, but if you can use your imagination, the groins do come out on the east side. So, or the structures have the groins at the far east. So again, the areas that were noticeably less sandy, less beach material are where the revetments are located. Again, those are the areas that were deemed as the most vulnerable by our experts. Then here's one more image, just sort of an overlay of what it would look like. Again, this is just showing where the revetment comes up onto the soil and the sand, as well as into the water levels as well. But again, it's 3 distinct locations. Again, if I haven't said it enough, it's just connecting to the existing groins.
Quick
Yes, sir.
So I can see at the very bottom, the failure that happened
Mhm.
at the west end of the property.
Mhm.
So there's no revetment going where that failed.
Correct.
Okay.
So, one of the discussions that we had initially with TRCA and the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, we had considered having another revetment there. That area was deemed to have the least impact on our property, our neighbor's property, but it did have an impact on the wildlife, and Department of Fisheries and Oceans actually requested to save additional habitat from being disrupted, that we would put that on the back burner and potentially look at a future revetment there. But at this time, it was not considered a high level at this time to address. But great question though. And again, part of that is because that area has now fallen to a much more stable slope. So it's not as steep as it was. It's obviously recessed slightly. So the big questions that members have: what will this have as an impact on the dining experience and the golf experience? So as this construction project is entirely marine based, the level and below the level of our facilities, we anticipate there will be no impact to your dining or golf experience. From time to time, there may be additional noise from the construction site, but the belief is that this will be minimally disrupted. The construction will take place 7 days a week with good weather, and they're saying from potentially 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. In order to facilitate meeting our timeline. But again, the experience should not be impacted in any way. So this image that you're seeing now was sort of our aha moment, or our scared straight moment. The yellow line that you can see on the image shows where, if we had a catastrophic failure, where the new top of the bluff line would be located. So I'll get through a bit of an explanation before I go into that detail, but so we engaged our coastal engineers for a detailed assessment to the risk to postpone construction of our shoreline protection measures. If they had told us that this could wait 10 years, I think we're having more of a conversation about the master plan next and then the bluff down the road, but they couldn't give us any real answer of certainty that by delaying the project, we would be able to sustain our bluff. So the risk certainly escalates significantly if and when the water levels were to rise by as little as 0.6 meters, or about 2 feet. The TRCA made similar conclusions in their study of the shoreline to the east and west of our property. For a better understanding of the risk of postponing this work or doing nothing, Baird prepared this analysis to show us what the major failure could look like. So the yellow line indicates the new top of bluff should a catastrophic failure occur. So we would basically lose half of our lawn, half of our putting green, 3/4 of the first tee, and the first hole. I haven't hit the fairway in the first hole in about 11 years, but it would be half as wide now as it is now. So this was really the moment where we knew we had to do something. So to go through this, to get to this phase, the permit process was quite the ordeal. But in the spring of 2025, plans for the work were approved by the Toronto Regional Conservation Authority. So we've also received permit approval from the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, as well as the Ministry of Natural Resources. And we've also honored the constitutional commitments to the Indigenous communities by receiving their support as well. After plans were approved, we sent out our tender documents for the planned work. So this gets us into the cost and timing. We received 2 qualified bids for the project. One quote was significantly higher and far exceeded our initial cost estimates. Fortunately, the other bid was right in line with our expectations, coming in just under $4 million, with an added 15% contingency and project management fees from Baird. Our working budget for the project is just north of $4.6 million. The club has approximately $6.3 million currently in deployable capital to pay for this, as well as other projects. So the board was happy to approve, after careful consideration and checking references, inspecting rocks for both quantity and quality, as well as a tour of the contractor's quarry. The board did approve us proceeding with the proposal from a company called Camp Construction Limited. So although 5 of the 7 companies that we reached out to declined to bid based on either due to availability of resources that they did not have within the timeline that was required, or being unable to execute a marine-based project, we're confident that the proposal we selected does fit our timeline as well as budget expectations. So again, we're going with an image here of, this is called Picton Terminals. This is where the rock and the armor stone will be loaded onto the barges. This is a facility in Prince Edward County. So this particular site is owned by the contractor that we're using, Camp. Essentially, the way that this process will work is it takes about 2 days to load the barge, about 20 hours of travel time to get here, about 2 days or so to unload the barge, and then that barge goes straight back to Picton Terminal. So we're looking at, once we get things started, it will be a continuous process from early July or late June until the end of October. And then really it just comes down to, thanking you as members for the continual support to be stewards of this property and take ownership of long-range plans and long-range potential that this property has. So really, much like the members who had the forethought to install the groins on the shorelines in the 1980s, future members will look back at this decision to protect the shoreline with fond memories, and it certainly is the main thing that will help protect this club's main asset as well. So, Mr. Lister, yes, sir.
Yeah, I mean, I think the answer is obvious, but this is pretty much a lifetime project. Like other than some super weather event, this would be considered.
Yes, the likelihood that I don't know what the timing. I mean, we're talking more than 50 years, if ever that this has to be readdressed.
Certainly, your lifetime.
Yes, sir. Okay, sorry, the question I believe was, has there been a further failure? Not necessarily on our property, but certainly between here and Wofford's Park, there's several, I should say more than several.
Are there associated risks with investing in all of this, but maybe not happening on property to the west?
So it's a great question. So again, the question is really, are we doing something that protects us but leaves our neighbors at risk? So great question. Really, the only areas that we can control are along our property, obviously. We know that there's a potential for a TRCA development of some form of bike path down the road. If they do go forward with that, obviously there's a lot of structure that has to be supported. But the city would be the one that would take the ownership of that project and that design. So there's nothing that we're doing that would save our shoreline and adversely affect our neighbors to the east or the west. So there's nothing that, the waves wouldn't dissipate off of ours and we'd be redirected into the neighbors or anything that would have any control. So to answer your question, we won't do anything that would hurt our neighbors, and we don't actually have the ability to really help them other than.
That actually wasn't really
Okay.
the direction of my question. So the direction of my question is, they don't do anything. Does that adversely potentially impact the Hunt's property after investing? So back in the 80s, I hate to say it, but I was on that. There was also a lot of plantings and trees and shrubbery, and anywhere on the bluffs where that does not happen, there has been erosion. So if the properties east and west don't do anything to protect their shoreline, is the Hunt at risk of having erosion on their edges?
Mr. Peters?
Yeah.
Hi, it's Kirby Peters. I can try to answer that. It possibly, but it's a very difficult one to answer, but they're beholden on the city and government funding because it's not, it's too much for them. They don't own the shoreline, the city does. And the city has a vested interest in having taxpayers continue to pay taxes versus their houses rolling into the lake. So they have a project. It's just taking an incredible amount of time to get it started, but it's something they are going to do. So those groins you see in those aerial shots, east and west of us, there's a number of them need topping up and reinforcements. They may be doing a revetment solution as well. We don't have the details, but it is underway and it's happening, just taking time.
I live actually on the bluff and the conservation authority comes in on drone. And I think in 18 years, I've lost 6 inches. So I planted sumac and that helps to pull the bluff up. So I think that's what they do along that area.
That's great. It's again, that video that we showed was directly from the drone footage that TRCA takes, so I know very well that they do that along the entire coastline. And again, the best thing I can say, we've had a very good relationship through this process with the TRCA. It behooves us to be nice, play nice in the sandbox at this point while we're waiting for their approval. We may not agree with the potential plans for a bike lane that goes across the entire shoreline, but at this point, we needed to control what we were able to control, and again, by sharing resources with them and understanding more about the work that they do, I think that got us to a position where it took some time to get our permits in place, but it certainly helped with the process, so. But again, it's nice to know that we do have sort of the governing body in good standing with us. Yes.
Is the city covering any of the costs to do this?
Unfortunately.
They're putting in this path?
Unfortunately, the city is not covering any of the costs yet. Now, the one thing that we will say is, again, if the proposed bike lanes ever happen, I think we have a very good potential bargaining chip to say, we've done all this work, we can show you the receipts. If we didn't do it, they would have to do it. And if we thought it was imminent, we might have been able to hold off and just wait until they were doing something, but I just think, given all of the reports and the data that we received, there was no reason to postpone this when the club is in a good financial position at the moment, and we certainly want to protect what we can.
So there could be a reimbursement at a later date.
I hope so, and again, I think that's sort of the concept of us playing well with TRCA to. Sure, please.
Color to that. I just want to add a little color to that. So you saw the aerial shots of our 3 little chunks of revetment, and that's $4.5 million. And it's they're about 600 or 700 meters each. So, 1,800 meters, and that's just the protection. This is a 4.5 kilometer trail. So it would need not only revetment for every inch of that trail, revetment to protect someone walking their baby or riding their bike as they're riding this path. Then you have to build a path on top of that. I can't even fathom how much money would be to put in this lovely little path versus, and then it's not, there's very little access for people to get down to this trail. So you have to figure that out where people park and on and on and on and on versus healthcare, education, public transportation. I just cannot see that money going to this lovely idea of a path. My opinion. Yes.
If the path did happen, would they expropriate the hunt's land?
It hasn't come to that point yet, but there is a thought that would be the plan from the city. So we'll have to cross that bridge when we get there. Without going too far into it, I think it would be very wise for us to start considering, what the alternatives would be. And again, we've talked briefly about, does it make it harder if we have plans or something other than, like, at the moment, we're not using it. But that doesn't mean we won't always use that beach area or that shoreline. So does it make sense to talk about what the pie in the sky project would be, so we can at least say, well, here's our plans. We were going to put in a water slide. Or not. But we're going to put in something, and that's why we want to fight to keep that land, but I think obviously we want to fight to keep that land, we'd rather not have it expropriated, but I'm just rambling at this point, but I think it will be wise for us to consider alternatives, so it's a bit more of a fight. Mr. Lister?
Yeah, just remembering along those lines, like a few years ago when there were the encampments down there, we went down and did the whole cleanup. I mean, I guess the downside to owning that land is that we are responsible for it, right? So if there is another issue of encampments and litter, I mean, it is our responsibility, right?
Yes, absolutely. So if I'm looking at a silver lining of the potential plan for the bike lane, whatever that might be, there would hopefully be more ability to monitor, whether it's bylaw enforcement, whether it's security, whether it's police or ambulance or fire that can get down there. Right now, it's very difficult, if not, I don't want to say impossible, but it's very difficult to police it on a regular basis. So there is an argument out there that if there was more of a public structure, it would have to have monitoring of those conditions.
That beach down there will remain a nude beach, right?
It's just less room for it. Let me just quickly dovetail it. You made a great question about, it is our land, we do have to sort of protect. So during the construction process, part of the contract with Dorn Camp is that they do have to secure that site on both ends of our property to make sure that it's a safe construction site, so there aren't trespassers and anyone gets injured down there. Mr. Hemsworth?
How much historical data is there on water levels in the lake in terms of, where and how well it can be controlled from all of the inputs and outputs and precipitation, et cetera?
Yeah, great.
Just to make sure that the preventants are sufficient for weather.
So great question. There's tons of data on where the lake levels were and where they are now. And again, for some to hear if the water level goes up by 2 feet, that's potentially catastrophic. Some people are thinking 2 feet on Lake Ontario is never going to happen. Might not. Some people think that could happen next year, and that's why it's so important that we at least do this. My understanding, again, I was a golf pro, I was not a marine engineer by any means, but my understanding of why the levels went up so much in 2017 and 2019, it wasn't necessarily what was happening directly in Toronto or Lake Ontario. It was that Montreal and areas down the St. Lawrence were actually more flooded than we were, and we, the residents of Lake Ontario, weren't able to allow as much water to flow out of Lake Ontario through the St. Lawrence. So I always assumed there's some guy that's literally turning a tap that, oh, it's too high, okay, let more out. Oh, it's too low, let's stop the flow. That seems to not be as much of a control as what I might have thought in my youth. So I hope that answers that question a little bit, but it's not as much in our control, controlling the water levels as we may hope.
Like when I think of like the transit system, there's the high point in the middle and it actually outflows to Georgian Bay into Lake Ontario. And how much does Lake Ontario, the important part of this, and how does it affect us, like you said?
Jason, I'll just add to what Jeff was saying, because I was very involved in that. The St. Lawrence Seaway governs how much water goes out of Lake Ontario to allow shipping. So they say, sorry, you're going to flood Lake Ontario and on up. So all the ships can come into Montreal as a main port. Otherwise, there's too much water going down the St. Lawrence. So shipping will be affected. So that was one of the big factors in 17 and 19, is that they couldn't let any more water down the St. Lawrence Seaway.
Right.
So
that's kind of what I was getting at.
Yes.
If we're second to the St. Lawrence Seaway,
We are.
then it's important that preventment's going. Yeah. Great.
Okay. Sure, go on. Yes, sir.
I'd like to thank the committee. Just fabulous work. Really
I'd like to thank them too. That's great, and again, member volunteers are the backbone of this club, and we've got some great ones, so I'm very fortunate. Any other questions?
Last question.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
I just wanted to ask about timing. You said we'd start in the next couple of weeks, until the end of October, which probably is of moving date. If for some reason we get hit by extremely bad weather and they would just start up again sometime in the spring, do we have any idea of how much cost that would involve? Is it, do they take it all away?
Mr. Mitchell?
For dinner, do it over. That's hilarious.
So good.
Yeah, it's over lots of money.
Yeah, exactly.
There's the potential if it does run over, for reasons that are beyond the contractor's control, if 50 weather days instead of 10 weather days. There is a $250,000 item in the budget for mobilization, but a lot of the mobilization work, they do it once, so it means they don't have to re-secure the area, they don't have to put in a lot of the erosion control things that they're doing right at the outset. So those things will overwinter and they're there for the next year, so it's a possibility, but it's, I think, a remote possibility because the contractor has the responsibility to, he won't necessarily work 7 days. He has a responsibility to work that if he needs to do it to make his timelines. It means he's paying more of his staff to do it, but we're paying on this project on a unit price basis. So if it's X million tons of rock, we pay by the ton and not by the amount of time that he has to spend to get it in place, because that's part of his job.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks, boss.
And beyond that, you do have the contingency built in, so there is cost overruns.
That's correct, yes. Yes, sir.
How much are subterranean streams runoff a threat to stability? Huge.
Yeah, so, but. And TerraProbe, another, the geotechnical engineering firm, has been involved in this property for many years. And they've helped us a lot and you see all these little drainage areas that take the water away from the bluff. We don't want it washing over the bluff and washing the bluff line away. So there's been a lot of work in that area to make sure that the water is being properly diverted away from the bluff. So I think we're pretty well set up in that department, not wood, but
That would be the surface water. What about the subterranean stuff running through the sand and between this strata?
yeah, so that I think is under control and isn't changing and it has been monitored. So you can see it when I've been down there a number of times. You can see where this does come out and then you can see little streams coming out. But I don't think that hasn't been identified by TerraProbe or Baird as a major concern. So, thank you.
Thanks.
Great question, and thank you, Mr. Peters, for answering it. I did not take subterranean drainage and golf swing fundamentals. Thank you.
My golf game includes those.
Any other thoughts, any other questions?
You need to work on your drive on the first.
He had a birdie.
That hurts.
Oh my God.
Drives the green, he doesn't need the fairway.
If anyone wants to know why my golf game is so bad, it's because I've been working on Bluffs today for the last 2
Yeah.
years. But it's you know, I just want to echo the sentiment that the work that this committee's done. It's been 4 years in the making to get us to this point.
Incredible.
And again, I think from a member support, this has been something that there's been no backlash to. It's a big project, but I think everyone views this as an important project for all of the club. So whether it's clubhouse golf members, partial play members, it's your club. And you are taking the ownership of protecting it for the long run. So it's admirable and we appreciate it. And yeah, it makes things a lot easier when we have the energy all going in the right place. So thank you.
Good job.
Okay, well, thank you so much for coming. Really appreciate it.
And apparently
Yes, of the calendar, yes, I need to focus.
Yeah, I was, I asked to speak to have it.
I'll try.
Okay, how's everyone doing? Thank you all for coming. We really appreciate your time and your interest in this very important club pursuit. Has everyone had a chance to read the document that was sent out last week and then again yesterday?
Yes.
Some have. Mrs. Jones, you'll get to it eventually. It's okay. Okay, great. So this presentation will closely mirror what was presented in that document. We will go into some Q&As later on in the presentation. you have any questions at any time, just please answer, raise your hand and we'll answer them as soon as we can. But again, thanks so much for coming. Appreciate it. So what we'll go through in this presentation is an introduction of our Bluff Stability Committee. We'll talk about some of the history of the bluff and shoreline protection that the club has undertaken in the past. We'll highlight some of our previous slope failures. We'll go into a little bit of the science of slope stability and stabilization. And then we'll use a term called revetments, and we'll talk about the construction process, what they are, how they will help protect our shoreline, where they'll be located, and what impact they might have on our golf course and dining experience. And then we'll talk about the risk of future failures as well, followed by what we went through to get to this point in the permit process. And we'll go through two of the most important things are cost and timing. And then again, we'll answer any questions at the end as well. So the first order of business, I would like to introduce our very, very competent, highly competitive, highly skilled golfers and great committee members. We have Mr. Kirby Peters, who's our chair. We have Mr. Jeff Armstrong, who's unable to be here today. We have David Baffa. We have Mr. John Doyle. We have Mr. Bob Mitchell. And everyone's favorite golf course and property